Lee Zukor, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Lee, we're going to talk today about product management, software development, what it takes to become a good product manager, what it means to be a good product manager. And we're going to do that by talking about your story. But I want to get started from today. And so I'm going to ask, what do you do today for a living?
Well, right now I am the Senior Vice President of Product and Technology at a company called Wild Alaskan Company. So I lead the product team, product design, and technology engineering.
Very good. Did you always think you were going to get into product? How did you get started into the whole product management area?
Yeah, well, so I mean, you and I know a little bit about each other. I started wanting to be a musician, so I studied English in college because I loved reading and writing, and I figured I didn't need to know any of these, technology things were just kind of getting rolling. So my plan was to be a rock star, and that's what I set out to do. But being a rock star just out of college, it didn't pay very well, and so I needed a job. As I did that, I had an English degree, and so I found a job as a technical writer. I was working at a large company as a technical writer, and I enjoyed the work, but I realized day after day, I was mostly just writing about bad software. I was trying to, write instructions that would help people use software that just wasn't made for them at all. Or is made for them functionally, but not in terms of experience, right? So I try to figure out, like, okay, how do I get past trying to help people use bad software? And the next thing that happened was I learned a little bit about user-centered design and usability. And a lot of technical writers were thinking about the same things that I was. And so when I started doing usability and user research and user-centered design, I learned a ton about how to actually design things that would work better for people. And I really enjoyed that work a lot. It turned out as a user-centered designer, I spent a lot of my time trying to convince engineers that they should be designing things in a more user-centric way, right? I did usability studies, I had videos, but still a lot of my work was trying to convince people that they should be doing things that were better for our users. I kept trying to kind of figure out, okay, what's the job you need to have where you don't have to convince somebody, where you actually get to do the thing that's right for the business and for your customers. And so I led an engineering team. I've never been a developer, but I led an engineering team. And when I was leading an engineering team, I realized that the people who the engineers were taking direction from, in a lot of cases, were the product managers. And so I kind of found my way to product management because I was trying to figure out how do you influence the building of things in a way that really works for your users and meets the business goals. And that felt like the right place to start.
So you were, without knowing it, you were putting together all of the pieces that make up product management on the user side, on the developer side, and kind of reaching the gap between them and becoming a translator between those different pieces. Is that what being a good product manager is about? Being a good translator between all the different pieces?
It's definitely part of it. I think, yeah, you point out something I think is very, very true. I think that, another piece of it is having empathy, right? And I think being a good translator and having some experience in each of those roles gives you more empathy when you're trying to figure out, when you're starting with business goals and trying to figure out how to align people, motivate teams, make trade-offs, really work closely with engineers to figure out, like, what's the right way to solve the problem in the near term and potentially in the long term. I think having that empathy and understanding of what goes into each of those roles is really important.
When you were a technical writer, did you get feedback directly from users that were trying to read your instructions? And did you see them struggling with them? I mean, being a product manager, a huge part of it is talking to your customers, right? Were you seeing that from the beginning of your career here?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a long time ago, but yes, I mean, I think the best way to write the instruction was to not only look at the software and what it did, but also to see people struggling with it and try to figure out how to help.
So you were getting all of these skills in a translator, having empathy, knowing how to negotiate between different teams, how to achieve your desired objectives, and doing the right trade-offs, right? How do most people that are good product managers like went to product management school, or do you see a lot of people that just got some of these skills through their career?
Yeah, I don't know a lot of people who've gone to a product management school. I know some people who've done boot camps and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think this is changing over time as it becomes kind of software product management is more and more of a thing that people are going to school for and wanting to do coming right out of school. But for most product managers, I know they've started some other way. I think maybe as a business analyst, maybe as a project manager, maybe as a software engineer who felt like they could have more of an impact as a product manager. It's an interesting set of skills, I think, that make a great product manager. And there are things that are definitely things you can learn. I think there's a technology piece, and those are things that you can study and learn. Great product managers are very analytical. I think you can learn a lot about how to be analytical and understand data and draw conclusions. You can learn how to be a good communicator, right? There are different ways to do that. But I also feel like the best product managers that I've worked with are people who have certain things that are a little bit harder to teach or a little bit harder to learn. I think being intellectually curious, for example, is super, super important, right? I think being empathetic, like I mentioned earlier, very, very important. And when I hire product managers, I try to find people who really, and I haven't found a better way to say it, but people who want the ball, right? Like a lot of times in a work environment, there are people who they want to solve their piece of a problem, and then they kind of pass it on to the next person who solves their piece of a problem. I feel like the best product managers are people who are not satisfied until the problem is solved, regardless of who owns which piece or what they're specifically responsible for. And those things are a little bit harder to teach, but they're really important.
So how do you find the people that want the ball when you're hiring for your team? What specific traits, what questions do you ask during an interview?
That's an awesome question. And I don't claim to get it right all the time. I think, I ask a lot of experience-based questions, and those questions tend to be around, maybe a project that a product manager decided to do on their own. Maybe it's something where they had an insight and it was something that hadn't been understood to the company, and they had to sell it to the company and talk to executives about it and articulate the plan. So somebody who can say, okay, I had an idea, it was grounded in data, I had to do a sales job, I had to understand the connection to the business, I had to work with engineers, and here was the outcome. I think questions like that help you understand who did you work with, where did you collaborate, how did you figure out what was important, how did you sell it? A lot of those kinds of questions I think are really important for just understanding how somebody's done that in the past.
If I may turn that question to you, what is can you tell me about a time, the one that makes you proudest, right? The one that makes you proudest, that you had to work through it and you had a gut feeling, whatever, you knew the data. Do you remember one? Like if I was interviewing you, do you remember one that you would like, this is the one I'm going to tell?
Yeah, there are several. But first of all, nice job turning that around. I think one example is many years ago, I worked at a company called Bluestem Brands, and we had a platform that was supporting multiple brands. We had 3 brands at the time, but the processes that we had and the platform that we had required us to do the same work multiple times, right? We weren't on a unified platform. And as a company, we were interested in acquiring more and more brands. So the first thing that happened at Bluestem was that we needed to pitch. It was me and several other people who I'm still good friends with, who are incredibly talented, some that Brandon Anderson, if you're listening, and Dave Micko are in particular people who are just fantastic people. And really, we worked together to figure out how to create a structure at the company that would support the goals that we had and the things that we knew we needed to do from a technology standpoint. So we, from pitching the idea of a product development structure, which didn't exist at the company, to aligning the rest of the company and the executives on a replatforming effectively of all of our properties. We changed the way we worked. We changed the work we did. We can go into a little bit more detail if you'd like, but I think that's an example of it required organizational. There was a lot of organizational complexity. There was a lot of selling. There was a lot of data that we needed to use to kind of help people understand why we were proposing what we were. There were frequent check-ins with stakeholders. We looked at business goals and efficiencies. It was really kind of an end-to-end, an overhaul very much of the way the company did e-commerce.
Who was the buyer there? Were you pitching to the CTO, CEO? Who was buying the idea?
It was the CEO ultimately.
CEO.
Yeah, but the entire executive team. At the time, we were directors who hadn't yet been promoted into executive roles, which eventually came, and that was great. But it was the C-level team. To some extent, we had to make sure that they were able to talk with the board about what we were trying to do. And the company we were at had a lot of kind of legacy systems and legacy people and legacy processes, and so we had to bring a lot of people along in order to transform the company the way we did.
Is that one of the requisites for a product manager to be successful, a C-suite that also is open to understanding the importance of the role, the importance of the influence they need to have across the company?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think a lot has been written about how challenging it is to be like a chief product officer at a company, especially a company where the CEO feels also as though they are, a product person. I think that the product role is a political role. I don't feel like I'm a political person. I don't love office politics, but I think you need to acknowledge as a product manager that part of your job is going to be helping to be understanding strategy and business goals, and then to be aligning your work against those things, right? And so that necessarily means that there are things that will get resources and things that won't get resources, and you need to be really good at understanding, which should be which, and then communicating the reasons for that. I'll tell you, I think that there are product leaders who are of the mind that kind of product is the smartest part of the organization, and that and there's they don't want to be as transparent, I think, because they feel like other areas within the company don't really understand and they wouldn't know what to do about it, and they have suggestions that don't make a ton of sense. I am a product leader who feels really strongly that transparency is the best way to work within an organization. I think especially when you're asking people to make trade-offs and you're asking for investment, I think having everybody aligned on here's what we're doing, this is what the most important thing is, this is what success looks like, and here are the things we're not going to do. I think that's incredibly important, and being able to do that well, I think, is the difference in a lot of cases between somebody who can work well with their executive team and somebody who can't.
When you need to get executives to buy in an initiative, and going back to the transparency being a key that you mentioned, do you try to talk to a lot of stakeholders and get a lot of support before you go to the C-suite, so that they know that you have already been working on this and already been talking to people and the opinion of the CTO of XYZ? Or do you try to, sometimes do you think there are situations where you need to just keep it, not confidential, but, tight, and then only when you have support from the top, you go to others? How do you manage that?
I think that there are differences in organizations in how they operate. And I have certainly worked with CEOs who would prefer that, that kind of, we did a product CEO mind meld before taking things to the rest of the team. I would say, like anything, else, it's best to show up in a meeting prepared. And so whatever prepared looks like at your organization is what you need to do. If I'm working at a place where the first thing to do is to talk with the CEO, I still think, you need to be prepared for that first meeting with data and insight and opinions and, whatever kind of research or whatever you need for that meeting. Uh, so I think that's really important in some organizations. In other organizations, being prepared means working with the rest of your stakeholders, making sure that the rest of the executive team is aligned, making sure nobody's surprised in a big meeting. I think you need to kind of be adapting to whatever the situation is. I'd say being prepared regardless is important.
Very good. Where do you think product management is today as a discipline, as a field of practice?
I think we talked just a tiny bit earlier about kind of education and background. I think that, it's clear that that product management is an important discipline. I think product management for software in particular is something that feels like more and more is kind of well understood, and people understand why it matters within a company. I still think that product management versus project management is tricky for people. I think it's tricky for really good reasons, right? Like the project manager role in an agile process is sometimes a little bit unclear who's going to do it and what you're responsible for. It sounds like you've had that experience too. Yeah. And so I think moving an organization from project to product is really challenging. I think it requires a really clear understanding of what the differences are. And it's very hard to get people thinking about, like what makes a good product and what are the projects maybe that need to be delivered in order to do that, rather than just kind of this list of projects, right? That you can crank out a whole bunch of projects and then never build a good product. I think we're still figuring out what that conversation looks like. Yeah.
It's an interesting one, and I've seen the concepts being utilized indistinctively. Project manager, product owner, and they are all different, right? They have different meanings and they have different consequences, and they have different scope. But I agree with you in that sometimes that gets used interchangeably.
So how do you help a company understand that, like when they are hiring a product manager but they really want a project manager, or vice versa? Like how do you actually navigate that?
I ask a ton of questions. So I say, oh, so you say project manager, and when you say project manager, you mean this, and this, or I think specifically when they say product manager, and I say, okay, so you need someone that will be talking to customers. Oh, no, they will not talk to customers. That doesn't sound like a product manager, right?
Right.
Or maybe it's more like a product owner that might talk to internal stakeholders and it's looking at the backlog, etc. But it's not talking to marketing. It's not talking about the sales strategy, right? Still someone
Right.
that is kind of in between stakeholders and the developers, yes, but not marketing, not sales, not strategy, right? I see the product manager as someone super strategic. And when I get asked for a product manager, it's weird that someone will outsource like a full-blown product manager, right?
Yeah.
That's when I start asking all of those questions. Also, because when I get the candidates, they are going to come into it super excited, and then they hit the wall and they are not doing so much strategy. And it's right. That's something I want to figure out at the beginning.
Yeah. That's a great point as it relates to the earlier comment about product leaders and CEOs being aligned, right? Like if you're building a team of product managers, you want to be really clear on like what's the role and how are they going to create or leverage strategy, and like what does that role mean within an organization? I still think it varies a lot depending on where you are.
Yeah. Do you see any other challenges that the field is facing besides the definitions and the kind of the clashes between product management and project management?
Well, I think let me think in terms of challenges. I think the challenges are organizational. I think that there are some market challenges right now that we're sort of working through. I think that certainly like new technologies are really important for product managers to understand and embrace in order to stay relevant. I think, the worst case would be to have a product manager who is just kind of in the way of a company delivering on big goals and engineers being able to be efficient. So, I think those are all challenges. I think they're challenges that we're, collectively actively working through, but they're not easy.
How do you, if you were a CEO, how will you measure the success of a product manager? Is it tied to sales? Is it tied to delivering on what, what is it, right? How do you define your OKRs, KPIs, etc.?
Well, I'm a big believer in everything stemming from company goals. And so I think a successful product manager is somebody who understands and executes on those, regardless of what they are, right? So for my current company, we're concerned with member acquisition, and we're concerned with retention, and there's a couple of other goals like that. And I think having a product management team, it's really all of kind of product development or digital product, depending on how you're organized. I think the goals need to ladder up to company goals, and the success of the digital product team has a lot to do with the success of the company. I'm a big believer in digital product teams having shared goals. So I think product managers and engineers and product designers should be incentivized the same way. They should be thinking about delivering the same things. I've seen teams where there's like an engineering roadmap and a product roadmap, and I'm a believer that if you have a pool of people and they're all working on the things that are most important, then there shouldn't be multiple roadmaps. Everybody should be aligned on those things. Those things should ladder up to company goals. We should be very transparent as an organization about what we're trying to achieve and what success looks like. So I don't know if it's a non-answer, but I think the successful product team is delivering on the company goals.
I think it's a great answer. And basically, it ties everything back to the North Star that the company has. It might be more users, it might be more revenue, it might, depending on what it is, that's how you're going to define your own objectives on how to achieve that. And then you need that partnership with the engineering team. Talking about that, partnering with engineering teams. Out of the CDOs or personally work with, who understood product the best and why?
I think there have been a couple. I've been really fortunate to have CEOs who really kind of understood product, and I think it's probably not an accident. In an interview process, you get a sense of who you're working with and how they feel about things. My current boss at Wild Alaskan understands very, very well. He's an engineer by training, and understands the process. I would say that he's hands-on and pretty involved in things, and I think there's a lot of advantages to that. I have also worked with CEOs at Imperfect Foods, at Blue Stem Brands, who were a little bit more hands-off and had an appreciation for what we were doing, but not as much of an understanding or maybe interest in the details. I think that can be really successful too. I've been really lucky in my career with the people that I've worked with, and I have been purposeful about making sure that I'm working with people who are aligned.
Very good. And with the technology team, with the development team, what needs to happen for product and development to work well together?
Some of the just kind of day-to-day mechanisms I think are great, right? Daily stand-ups and those kinds of things kind of start to foster some good communication. I think that having the right amount of process is important. I think building trust is incredibly important. And I think that this, one thing that I really focus on that I think a lot of companies kind of miss is context. Over the years, I've kind of surveyed a bunch of my teams and other teams through companies, and it's very, very frequently people respond that work is great, but they don't have the context they need to make decisions. They don't get information that they need in time. They communication just doesn't flow that well. I think that my philosophy on building great teams, including digital product and product development teams, is that you need to hire great people, but you need to give them the ability to kind of do their jobs, right? And the ability to do their jobs means they have to understand company goals. They have to understand business context. They need to understand how a company makes money. They need to understand, if the company is in a challenging financial position because there's been some investment. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that people can, in a company where people can be transparent. Certainly there's cases where people can't know everything. But the more you can share with your team, the better off you're going to be. The product people, product designers, software engineers are very, very smart people and generally very logical people. And if you can help them understand the why behind what they're doing and the value behind what they're doing, and then even better, if you can follow up afterwards to show them the impact that the work they had on the business or its customers, I think then, you can have a very, very high performing, very successful team.
What do you think about the development team being in touch with customers? How is it, how do you do it to do it right? When do you do it to do it right? Do you open that possibility? Do you close that possibility? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, already from our conversation that I'm very, very open to the possibility. I love it. I want engineers to have as much direct contact and information as they can. I think the specifics are all, kind of to be figured out as you go. I think there are certainly times when you want to give your engineers the ability to be heads down on projects, and sometimes product managers can be great translators and help kind of protect engineering time. But I think done right and at the right time, I think it's really important. I think, I actually, going back to the story that I told, when we first started talking, I think having you've got people who are writing about bad software and trying to design software so it's not quite as bad. And I think all of those things, get much easier when your engineers have empathy for their users, for your members, for your customers. And that comes from direct experience more than anything else.
Do you see that often? Do you think that in other companies, developers know what the users are going through, or sometimes are they operating just in a silo of, user story, get this ticket done?
Yeah, I don't think it happens often at all. I think it's a super great point. I think it needs to happen more. It's very much related to that context, right? You just, reading about something is very different than experiencing it yourself.
Yeah. Wondering out loud, do you think, so Agile gave us a lot of rules on how to allow engineers to focus on their work so that they can be more productive, right? And also it gave us tools so that we can change scope as and when needed, and have short delivery cycles so that we can adapt, right? But at the same time, I will venture, and I want to know your opinion, that we protected software developers so much that we did them a disservice, because right now, in between just talking to the product owner and maybe the scrum master is there, etc., etc. If you follow Agile to the letter of the book, it feels like they are not really talking to anyone many times. Maybe doing a demo for leadership, right? But
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I think
right.
You're right. I think you're right. I think we've got a lot of things wrong. When it's this whole thing, when I first became aware of it, it was called like XP, or extreme programming, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day. And extreme programming was supposed to be like a customer, a developer, and a business person, I think, right? I think it was just a group of three people, and they would iterate, and you knew because your customer was there that you weren't going to build the wrong thing. And I think, I'm not sure that I would advocate for that approach again, but I do think that we've gotten especially in this remote environment, right? We've just gotten far away from our customers. We've also gotten worse at asking each other questions. I feel like, we have this conversation all the time with my current team that is, it's very easy to suffer in silence and to have a technical issue or a person issue or a requirement issue and try to figure it out on your own because you don't want to bug anybody and you can't just walk over to somebody's desk. And I think we need to work hard to get over those things and get closer to each other, ask more questions, get to know our customers better.
Can someone be a good technology leader if they don't know how to code?
Well, I hope so, because that's what I am. I think that I would not say it's an advantage to not be a developer myself, but I would say it's okay if you have the right person, they understand the technology enough, they have the right level of empathy. For me as a leader, my strength has really been building teams, making sure they're aligned, making sure they have the right goals, making sure they have what they need to operate well, creating an environment where the best people can have the right conversations, identifying what some of those conversations are. But when we get into like deep architecture conversations, I want somebody there who has that skill set. I think that I've been, pretty successful in making that happen. And I think this is my fourth job now where I've been hired as the product and product design leader and also then taken on the technology team. And I think that's because there is a real need on the technology side for empathetic leaders who can align teams around company goals, bring out the best in the engineers, help them with kind of, career development and context and that kind of thing. And I think it's hard to find people who are able to do that across multiple teams. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I absolutely need great technologists who are working on my teams in order for us to be successful, for sure.
This one is a question that, I always ask it with a disclaimer. I know I'm leading the witness because of the elephant in the room, but what new technology gets you excited?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. There's this thing called AI, right? There's the elephant in the room. I mean, it's impossible not to talk about AI, right? It's the possibilities are endless and incredible, and the value that it will unlock for our business and really for every business that's paying attention are enormous. People have a lot of fear around it, and I think keeping your AI discussions rooted in not just what the technology can do, but why it matters and what it can do for your business and what it can do for your customers. I think those are the kinds of conversations that keep you rooted in the things that are important. It's not I prefer to think of it as we've got these business problems and it is an incredible way that we can start to think about solving them, as opposed to, all right, AI is this big thing and we're a technology company and we got to figure out how to use it.
Right.
I think those conversations are interesting, certainly. And I just like anybody else who's intellectually curious, like I love to kind of ruminate on what it means to the world and what it will mean to our kids. But there's real ways to add value to our members' lives leveraging AI. And so those are the conversations I'm most excited about.
Do you, both of your kids are in college?
Yes.
Do you think often, or do you talk with them about what their, what the future of work will be and what world they are getting in?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's also a hard question. I would say we talk about it a little bit. My son is a jazz bass major. And so I would say he's kind of gone a path that's pretty far away from the technology stuff that we've been talking about. Although, you and me and many of the other technologists I know are also musicians or jazz majors, right? I think what I love when I talk to my kids is to understand kind of how they're thinking about the workforce. They're very much, they talk a lot about being in person and making sure that's part of the experience. We talk a little bit about technology. We talk a little bit about social media, a little bit about AI. But, as a parent, I think you need to be a little bit cautious about those conversations and make sure that you're not maybe leading the witness too much and letting your kids explore those things for themselves. Yeah, I love to engage in those topics. Also, I want the kids to find their own path.
It's a great approach. Lee, one last question. What do you do when you are not working?
Oh, well, all sorts of things. Well, we talked a little bit about music. I play in a band. I love that. It's, making great music and playing music with people that I just really love. So I look forward to that. It's a part of the creative process that I just kind of can't get enough of. I write songs and I sing and play guitar. So that's great. I love to ride my bike. I play tennis. I love to travel. I eat good food. And so some of that is, I work at a company that sells really good wild caught salmon and other fish, mostly from Alaska. I like to cook, but yeah, I think all that stuff. I buy too many vinyl records. It's just something that I love. There's something about that experience. I think a lot of people are experiencing that, right? Where you could get everything on Spotify, but it's kind of nice to just sit down and listen for 20 minutes to one side of a record. So I'm enjoying that also. I read books. I do a lot of things. I have a lot of hobbies.
2 follow-up questions. First one, how many records do you have?
I don't know, 300, something like that. I know it's not going to impress anybody who's a real vinyl collector.
No, 300. It impresses me. It impresses me. I had a friend that what he does is he has an app or something. So when he goes and look for records, he doesn't remember all the 300, right? So he keeps a list just to make sure when he gets excited about one, do I already have this one, right? Are you at that point?
A problem when you don't remember if you have it, right?
Yeah, you have too many, right?
Yeah, right.
And then the other question that I had is pickleball. The whole crazy thing about as a tennis player, right? You love tennis, you like playing tennis, and you see all of those guys playing pickleball. And now I turn on even ESPN and I see a pickleball contest, and I'm like, what's your reaction?
Pickleball is like AI, isn't it? It's here to stay, and we need to figure out how we're going to reckon with it and use it for positive purposes. I love tennis. I've played pickleball a couple of times. I think that's really fun too, and so yeah, there's room in my life for both.
Very good. I love that answer, Lee. It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope we can do this sometime again. I hope sometime we can play music together. Who knows?
I would love that.
And I appreciate you being a part of the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks.